When I came home early from my mountain getaway, the last thing I expected was my HOA president, Karen herself, calling the cops on me. But the real shock? Her entire extended family had moved into my cabin like it was theirs. I wasn't just angry, I was ready for war. The drive back to my mountain cabin was supposed to be quiet, maybe even a little melancholy. I'd cut my trip short after a sudden storm had washed out the hiking trails I'd been planning to explore, and the thought of an empty cabin, a warm fire, and a good book felt like the perfect consolation prize. The air was crisp that morning, the kind that smells faintly of pine and wet earth, and the 2-hour drive from the nearest town always felt like slipping into another world. I'd left the cabin locked tight a week ago, every window latched, security camera armed, and thermostat set low to save on heating costs. No one but me had the keys. And yet, as I turned down the narrow gravel road toward my driveway, something instantly felt off. The driveway, which usually looked like it had been untouched for days, was packed with tire tracks. Not just one vehicle either, multiple. My stomach gave a slow, uneasy twist. I pulled up closer and froze. My cabin, my private retreat tucked deep in the mountains, was alive with activity. There was smoke curling from the chimney. The front porch was littered with lawn chairs and blankets I'd never seen before. A battered cooler sat beside my steps, half open and leaking melting ice across the deck. And parked in front of my garage were 3 vehicles, 2 SUVs and an old pickup truck I didn't recognize. For a moment, I wondered if I'd stumbled onto someone else's property by mistake. But there was no mistaking the weathered red siding I'd painted myself or the carved wooden bear statue my late father had made that stood proudly by the porch. This was my place, and yet, it looked like someone else was living in it. I parked off to the side, heart thumping, and stepped out slowly. Voices drifted from inside, laughter, the sound of clinking plates and music faintly playing from a speaker. I climbed the porch steps, my boots crunching against scattered peanut shells on the wood, and reached for the door. That's when I noticed it. My welcome mat had been flipped upside down, and my lock, my expensive deadbolt, had been replaced. Replaced. A chill shot down my spine. I knocked hard, no answer. I knocked again, louder this time. The music paused, and a moment later the door swung open. Standing there, wearing a robe that definitely wasn't hers, was Karen Henderson, the self-appointed queen of our neighborhood HOA. She was in her late 50s, blonde hair sculpted into a helmet-like shape, and a permanent look of disapproval that could cut glass. She blinked at me in surprise, then immediately narrowed her eyes. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. I just stared at her. "Karen, this is my cabin. What do you mean, what am I doing here?" She crossed her arms. "You weren't supposed to be back until next week. We've already settled in. The kids are upstairs." I took a step forward. "Settled in? Karen, why are you in my house?" She gave me a look like I was the one trespassing. It was sitting empty. My brother's family was visiting from out of state, and they needed somewhere nice to stay. The HOA agreed it would be fine for them to use it. You weren't using it, so... I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I was so stunned I couldn't think of what else to do. "The HOA doesn't own my cabin, Karen. I do." Before she could answer, a tall man in sweatpants came into view behind her, holding a mug of coffee like he owned the place. "Everything okay, hun?" he asked her. Karen tilted her head toward me. "It's just the owner. Came back early." The owner. Like I was some kind of inconvenience. I forced my voice to stay calm. "Everyone needs to leave, now." Karen gave a tight little smile. "You can't just kick us out. My family is here for the weekend, and we've made ourselves comfortable. If you cause a scene, I'll have to call the police." I almost choked. "Call the police? You're trespassing in my home." Her eyes glinted. "And I'll tell them you're harassing me. The HOA rules are very clear about community behavior." That was the moment I realized I was dealing with more than a simple misunderstanding. This wasn't just Karen being Karen. This was her staking a claim, like my cabin was some communal property she had the right to hand out. I stepped back, my mind racing. Confronting her here wasn't going to get me anywhere. She'd twist the story, and with her connections in the community, I could already see her trying to turn the narrative against me. But she didn't know something important. While I'd been gone, my security system had been recording the entire time, and it had captured everything. I glanced past her into my living room. There were piles of shoes by the door, suitcases on my rug, and a half-eaten breakfast spread across my dining table. My heart pounded in my ears. I turned and walked back to my car without another word. Karen called after me, her voice smug. "You're overreacting. We're just borrowing it." Borrowing it, without permission, without a key, after breaking my lock. As I drove back toward town, my anger solidified into something sharper. She thought she could intimidate me with the HOA and twist the truth in her favor. She was wrong. I was going to get my cabin back and make sure Karen regretted ever stepping foot inside it. I drove into town with one goal: gather every piece of evidence I needed before going back. I wasn't going to give Karen the satisfaction of seeing me rattled, but I also wasn't going to just stand by while she and her freeloading relatives turned my cabin into their vacation lodge. First stop was the local coffee shop, partly because I needed caffeine to keep my thoughts straight, partly because the Wi-Fi there was faster than my satellite internet at the cabin. I sat at a corner table, pulled out my laptop, and logged into my home security system. The first video clip made my blood run cold. 4 days ago, Karen had walked right up my porch steps in broad daylight with 2 men I didn't recognize. She glanced around once, then handed one of the men a toolbox. A few minutes later, my front door lock was gone, replaced with the one I'd found today. Then, in they went, hauling in bags, coolers, and boxes like they just closed on a new timeshare. Another clip from the next day showed children running through my living room, bouncing on my couch, and dragging blankets onto the floor. One kid knocked over the ceramic lamp my mom had given me years ago. Karen was in the background, smiling like she was hosting a family reunion. Every clip made my jaw tighten. This wasn't ignorance, this wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. I downloaded every file, making backups on both my hard drive and cloud storage. Then, I sent a copy to my attorney, my neighbor and longtime friend, Victor. Victor called me within 10 minutes. "Please tell me I'm not seeing this right," he said. "You're seeing it right," I replied. "They broke in and moved in." There was a pause. "Then we're calling the sheriff right now." The county sheriff's department operated out of a small office just 20 minutes from my cabin. Victor met me there, and together we explained the situation to Deputy Morales, a broad-shouldered man with a calm voice and a skeptical eyebrow. "Let me guess," Morales said. "Karen Henderson?" I blinked. "You know her?" He smirked. "Let's just say you're not the first person to complain. But she's never gone this far before." I slid my laptop across the desk. "She has now." Morales spent the next 5 minutes watching the clips, his expression hardening with each passing second. "All right," he said finally. "We're going to the property. But I'm warning you, people like Karen will make a lot of noise and act like they're the victims. Keep calm. Let me do the talking." We followed Morales back toward the cabin, Victor riding shotgun with me. My pulse quickened the closer we got. By the time we pulled into the driveway, Karen was already on the porch, arms crossed, lips pursed like she'd been rehearsing her lines. And sure enough, as soon as she saw Morales, she launched into her performance. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she called out, her voice dripping with fake relief. "This man is harassing my family and threatening to throw us out of our vacation rental." I almost laughed out loud. "Vacation rental?" I said. "Karen, this is my—" Morales held up a hand. "Ma'am, I've seen the footage." That made her falter for just a second before she recovered. "Footage? You mean the cameras he installed without HOA approval? That's a violation right there." Morales' voice was firm. "The footage that clearly shows you breaking into this home and occupying it without permission." The porch went quiet. One of the men, tall, bearded, probably Karen's brother, stepped forward. "Hey, hold on. She said it was fine. She told us the owner was a friend who let her use the place whenever she wanted." I folded my arms. "And did you see me anywhere giving her a key? Or maybe the part where she literally had to change the lock to get inside?" Karen's face turned a shade of red I'd only seen on overripe tomatoes. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" Morales cut her off. "Ma'am, you and your guests need to gather your belongings and leave immediately. You're trespassing." Her mouth opened and closed like she was about to argue, but something in Morales' tone must have convinced her otherwise. She turned sharply, storming inside. Through the open door, I could hear her snapping at her family to pack up now. It took nearly half an hour for them to clear out. They dragged suitcases down my porch steps, loaded up coolers, and slammed car doors with the kind of force meant to make a point. Karen was the last to leave, pausing in the driveway to glare at me. "You've just made a big mistake," she hissed. "I run this neighborhood. You'll regret this." I stepped closer. "Karen, the only thing I regret is not installing brighter cameras so I could see the look on your face when you realized you were caught." She didn't answer, just climbed into her SUV and tore down the road. Morales waited until the dust settled before turning to me. "She's going to try something. People like that don't just walk away." He was right, because the very next morning, Karen filed a complaint against me with the HOA. Not only that, but she had the nerve to post on the neighborhood Facebook group claiming I'd verbally assaulted her and endangered her family. She turned herself from trespasser into victim in less than 24 hours. What she didn't know was that I'd already started my own plan, one that would make sure she never tried something like this again. Karen's complaint to the HOA wasn't just a petty jab, it was a full-on smear campaign. By the time I saw the email from the HOA board, she'd written a 3-page incident report filled with colorful lies. I had stormed into my own home without warning. I'd threatened her family and endangered the welfare of minors. I had illegal surveillance equipment that violated HOA privacy rules. She even claimed that she had been doing me a favor by keeping the property warm and in use so it wouldn't attract wildlife or squatters. The gall of this woman, what she hadn't counted on, was that I still had every second of security footage, plus the official sheriff's report stating she'd been trespassing. And thanks to Victor, who happened to be not just my friend, but also one of the HOA's elected members, I had an inside track to the upcoming monthly meeting. "Let her talk first," Victor advised. "Then you drop the hammer." The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. Word had spread that Karen and I were going to face off, and in a neighborhood this small, drama like this was practically a spectator sport. Karen sat at the head of the table, wearing her official HOA name tag and that smug smile that made my blood pressure rise. "As many of you know," she began, "there was an incident last week involving one of our property owners, Mr. Stevens here." She gestured toward me with the kind of theatrical pause you'd see in a courtroom drama. "I was forced into an uncomfortable situation when he unexpectedly returned early from a trip and created a hostile environment for my visiting family. I am requesting a formal censure for his behavior and removal of his unauthorized surveillance equipment." There were murmurs around the room. A few people looked at me like I might be the villain in this story. "May I respond?" I asked. Karen leaned back, smug. "By all means." I stood, walked to the center of the room, and set my laptop on the projector table. "Everything I'm about to show you is time-stamped and recorded by my legally registered home security system. The same one that caught exactly what happened at my cabin." The first video played. Karen arriving with her 2 accomplices, toolbox in hand. The sound of the drill echoed through the speakers as they removed my deadbolt. A few gasps rippled through the audience. The next clip showed her leading her family inside, kids running wild, suitcases being dumped on my rug. Karen was laughing, glass of wine in hand, as one of the kids knocked over my lamp. By the third clip, Karen sitting at my dining table in my bathrobe, the room had gone completely silent. I clicked to the final file, the audio from my front porch confrontation. Karen's own voice saying, "You weren't supposed to be back until next week. We've already settled in. The kids are upstairs." When the clip ended, I turned to the board. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a break-in. The sheriff's department has already confirmed it was trespassing, and as for the cameras, Colorado state law allows me to record on my own property without anyone's permission. Karen was fully aware she had no right to be there. I looked right at her. "You abused your position as HOA president to hand out someone else's property like it was yours, and then you tried to ruin my reputation to cover it up." Karen's face had gone pale. She opened her mouth, but the murmurs in the room had shifted. This time, they weren't against me. They were against her. Victor cleared his throat. "As a member of this board, I motion to remove Karen Henderson from her position as HOA president effective immediately, pending a full review of her conduct." "I second that," said another board member almost instantly. The vote wasn't even close. Out of the 9 board members, 8 voted to remove her. Karen stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. "This is a witch hunt," she snapped. "You're all going to regret this when—" "Karen," Victor interrupted, "please leave the building." She stormed out, muttering under her breath, her heels clacking across the hardwood floor. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Without her constant meddling, the HOA actually functioned like a normal community. But the best part? 2 weeks later, Morales stopped by my cabin with an update. "Thought you'd like to know," he said. "Karen's been charged with criminal trespass and destruction of property. Guess your video came in handy." I smiled. Guess it did. Karen tried to appeal the charges, of course, but with the footage, the sheriff's report, and half the neighborhood now aware of what she'd done, her influence was gone. She eventually sold her house and moved away. The bear statue my father carved still stands by my porch. But now, every time I see it, I think about the day I walked up to my cabin and found someone else living in it, and how satisfying it was to watch the so-called queen of the neighborhood lose her crown. And I've got to admit, my cameras have never felt like a better investment.